Okay, why don't we say a quick word of prayer before we get started. Bow our heads. Lord God, thank you for that magnificent day. Thank you for the opportunity to gather together. Thank you for the message we received today from Pastor. Help us to go home and apply it. Pray that you would give myself the words to speak and the knowledge and wisdom to impart. Thank you for this blessing, thank you for this opportunity, Lord, and we give you all the praise and the honor. Help us have a wonderful time after we do the Haynes. Thank you for their hospitality. Bless our time, we pray, Lord, in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, so it is my turn this week, and I'm excited to talk about this subject because it's I think it's very vital to our country. I think it's vital to us as Christians. We're going to be talking about, like, literally what our attitude should be. Like when your mom, when you were little, she looked at you and said, "You better change your attitude." Like, that's what we're talking about, your attitude, you know, literally. There's a ton of definitions of attitude. I wrote down, it's what you communicate about yourself without communicating it verbally. Does that make sense? 90%, or it's something ridiculous, and I believe this to be true. 80 to 90% of communication is nonverbal. You can say all the things you want, but it's all how you say it. I think it's very important in our culture right now. If everybody's attitude would change, the country would change. That makes sense? Everybody's got this gimme syndrome, and it's all thinking about yourself. And I'm going to talk about how when the only way to have a good attitude is when you're focused on others. Okay? When we talk about, and I'm going to talk about having a positive attitude, I think a positive attitude is 100% biblical. And because when I think about a positive attitude, I'm going to ask you guys this question too. When I think about a positive attitude, I think, well, back in the day, I don't think it's anymore. When I first heard of a positive attitude back in the day, I was all like, it's about a guy coming up to you and saying, hey man, are you excited? Right? That's not, to me, that's weird. You know what I mean? That's weird. That's not positive. That's just weird. And as always, we will be defining a positive attitude with the Bible. There's no other way to define a positive attitude. Okay? So, when you think of somebody, this is a question, for you guys, anybody can answer. When you think of a positive attitude, when somebody has a positive attitude, what do you think of? What are they like? Characteristics.
Encouraging.
Encouraging?
Sticking it out. And just persevering through something without complaining.
Perseverance? Totally biblical.
Glass half full,
Glass half full.
not half empty.
Not half empty.
Yes, half full.
Yep.
Grateful.
Grateful. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say thankful.
Thankful. There's a lot of things actually in Pastor's sermon today that I'm going to come back to because it's very relative to what I'm going to be talking about. I am not an attitude expert, okay? I'm constantly working on my attitude, constantly. And I don't have the perfect attitude, but we can all do this. We can all look at Christ's attitude and copy it. We can all do that. And that's what I intend to do, and we're going to go through some biblical examples of that. Just make sure I'm not missing anything here. Did Jesus have a positive attitude? Answers. Go ahead. Yes, no, why or why not? Did he have a positive attitude? What made him have a positive attitude? Well, yeah.
Could I say that there were mixed, I think mixed times, like, I mean,
Yeah.
I think he went through the hardest things that any human would ever have to go through, and I can think of times where, and this is making me think, I never really thought about it this way, when he's in the garden before he went to the cross, like a positive attitude, you know, and I do think that when you talked earlier about, you know, the positive attitude idea of that guy that comes up and, oh, hey, you know, get excited and stuff like that. That's kind of what I thought positive attitude meant too, and I'm actually kind of questioning that as you're talking. So I guess, you know, I would assume Jesus, since Jesus is perfect, that his attitude, as God would define attitude, which I'm assuming probably get to, is what we're really trying to figure out here.
Yep.
So I was about to say Jesus mixed, but I can't say Jesus doesn't have a bad attitude. I don't think it's possible.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna get into that, but go ahead, Tim.
I think it's, what's the definition of positive? So then we have to define what positive is.
Yep.
And I think that's, you know, doing the Father's will. So if you're doing the Father's will, that's a positive attitude, whether it's turning over a table in the temple or holding a child and not forbidding the children to come unto you. So.
Yep. Yep. Jeremiah?
Seems like he always had a positive attitude with his disciples. I mean, he always tried to assume the best, and he didn't give up on them, and continued to stick with them even when they didn't have faith.
We're gonna define, end up with the definition, I'm gonna come up with what I believe a positive attitude based on the Bible it really is. But an example, I mean, I'm just gonna take you to the attitudes. I mean, 539, do not resist an evil person, Matthew 5:39. Whoever slaps you on the cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Okay? If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Wyatt mentioned this earlier. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say you love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use and persecute you. Does that sound like a positive attitude or a negative attitude? How are you supposed to do those things if you have a negative attitude? If you have a negative attitude, I can already tell you're not doing these things. Why would you? Negative attitude is hopeless. Okay. Okay, and I have another example, Matthew 5:11, just before that, blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad when that happens. I'm not rejoicing and exceedingly glad when that happens to me. Anybody, when they talk about a positive attitude, they have to come back to the Bible. Like I read some John Maxwell, I read a lot of self-help books and stuff like that. When they talk about a positive attitude, all they're doing is reflecting the Bible. That's it. And we have to talk about this stuff. A question for the dads out there. Let's. If your 10-year-old son, if he has a bad attitude, and you look at him and you say you need to change your attitude, and he says, "Why?" Are you prepared to answer him like that? Do you have a reason in your head that you said because this? If you don't, why don't you? Why? One of the things you could say right away, because Christ had a good attitude. But I believe you should be ready on the spot when your kid asks a question like that. That's for the moms too. Well, that's another question I was asked for when Tim mentioned it, but I call it negative positivity. How about the clearing of the temple? Was that positive? Question, answer, go ahead.
They were positively cleared out.
They were absolutely and positively cleared out of the temple. Yep, yep. How about the cursing of the fig tree? He was hungry. Let me read it. Let me read it. It's because it absolutely looks like a looks like a temper tantrum. Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. So now in the morning, as he returned to the city, he was hungry. And seeing a fig tree by the road, he came to it and found nothing on it but leaves. And he said to it, "Let no fruit grow from on you ever again." Immediately the fig tree withered away. And I mean, there's a whole point, behind this. I mean, he did that so it was all for a lesson. There's a point in everything Christ does. Everything he does, there's a point. And it's right after that. When his disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, "How did the fig tree wither away so soon?" So Jesus answered and said to them, "Assuredly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what was done to the fig tree, but also if you say to this mountain, 'Be removed and be cast into the sea,' it will be done. And whatever things you ask in prayer, believing, you will receive." So there was always a point. Absolutely, when he cursed the fig tree, it was positive. Absolutely. Okay? What about when he called Peter Satan? Was that positive? Why? Why was that a positive thing? Anyone?
He was speaking truth.
Speaking truth? We heard that today.
It was a teaching moment.
It was a teaching moment. Yeah, I mean, again, it was, everything about it was,
Spanking your child is a teaching moment.
right.
You can do that with a positive attitude.
Yeah.
You should do it. You better do it.
Better than
You better have thought of that. Yeah. Yeah. I remember, and this is my me and my wife talk about how we raise all the time, and she talks about how her parents would only spank her and her brother when they were angry. You know what I mean? They would let the kids build up their anger just to the point of the boiling point, and that's when they would do it. And that will instill in your child a negative attitude every time. I know. Listen, and one of the reasons I know this is because my mom and my dad had just drilled this into us. I mean, ever since we were, so it's just another example. But I'm going to talk. There is, another definition of positive attitude is making the best of the worst situation. Okay, let's talk about Christ while he was on the cross. There was someone in the middle of his death who benefited greatly from Christ's death. Now all of it is just sorrow, death everywhere when Christ was dying, but there was someone who benefited, who greatly, a person during that time. Anybody can take a wild guess. It can be hard. Yes, sir.
The thief on the cross?
Thief on the cross. Yep. Do you think that guy ultimately had a positive experience on the cross with Christ? Yeah. Listen, I'm just talking about a couple examples here. The Bible is just full of I could pick any biblical character and their example is going to be positive. Clearing of the temple, degrading of Peter, calling Satan, the 7 woes to the Pharisees. Something negative about it. Sometimes you have to be negative about certain things. It's okay to be angry about certain things. Another thing about Christ, Always talking about the future. Always talking about the future. I will, or I shall, he shall, you will. All the time. Talking about the past only when he was he's only talking about the past when he's talking about the future. You know, just for examples and stuff like that. It's all about perspective. It's all about perspective. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention was, how about Jesus praying for his murderers while he was on the cross? You know, like, forgive them for they know not what they do. I think they knew what they were doing. You know? Maybe they did. I don't know. Well, if Christ said they didn't, then they did. It's all about perspective. Romans 9. Most guys here familiar with Romans 9? What it says? Basically, we don't have a choice in ourselves. God's will is sovereign. I'm going to submit to you that this passage, if you were, it is a, you need to have a positive attitude for the passage. Does that make sense? You're either going to go two ways with this. You're going to go, since you don't have a choice, Christ, Paul is saying, before, Jacob and Esau had done anything good or bad, he said the older was served the younger, didn't have a choice, right? You can look at that and say, well, why does God still find fault, right? You look at that and say, well, that's horrible. Why would God do that? I can't believe in a guy like that. Or as a Christian, you can say, I'm just so thankful that God in His mercy reached down and saved me, and I'm glad I don't have to figure this out. Right? I'm glad I can move on, because you know what? Paul doesn't even answer the question. Why does God still find fault? And Paul doesn't even answer it. He says, who are you to say that? I didn't even ask that question. Right? That is a positive response. Because again, one of the definitions I came up with is a positive attitude is anything that directly or indirectly points to Christ. Any behavior that directly or indirectly points to Christ. Is this making sense here so far? I just want to make sure I'm here. Here's a question for you. And that Romans 9 was an example of perspective. It's all in your perspective of how you look at it. Some people look at it as I'm grateful, and some people look at it as I'm angry. That's a perspective on Romans 9. And the Christian, you have to have a good perspective, you have a positive perspective. Philippians 4:8, whatever is good, whatever is noble, whatever is not the wrong things, but why does he say, when he says meditate or think on these things, why does he say that and not do these things? Why does he say just meditate on them and think about them? Answers. Why does he just say that? Why does he not say do these things?
Elsewhere it says that the overflow of your heart you will do, or you will speak.
Yep.
So if your heart is overflowing with good and noble thoughts, you will do and say good and noble things.
That's exactly right. Paul understood that your thoughts lead to your attitude, and your attitude leads to your actions. I think this teaching back then was ludicrous to people. Like, who was thinking about this stuff back then? I think this is an obvious passage just about Philippians 4:8 is an obvious fact that Christ was behind Paul's words. Does that make sense? Because I don't think anybody was teaching this stuff. You think that? I don't know. Dude, who was teaching that the mind controls and the heart controls? Like, who was teaching that? Anybody except Christians back in the day? You know, I just think these people were not appalled, but I think they were just, what is this guy talking about? You know?
Good question.
Yep, oh, I'm sorry.
I believe actually that the Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, were taught something along those lines, but they separated, they had that Greek philosophy of the spiritual is good but anything that you do in the flesh is going to be tainted, and it is inherently evil. So they were always trying to attain to what Plato called the form, the ideal.
Okay.
And so you could contemplate on those things, you should think on those things. But their conclusion was it's hopeless. And that's the difference between Christian thought and Greek thought. It's absolutely hopeless. There's no hope.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, in addition to that, I believe the objects, I think what would have been most surprising, maybe not the content as much, although the content would be surprising, based on what John just said. Because for them, you couldn't do anything in the material world that wasn't tainted by evil. It was always somehow bad. But I think what was maybe more surprising is the objects to which he was speaking. He was speaking to these people, this thing called the church, which was made of all kinds of people, slaves even. And the Plato Aristotle stuff, that was done in the university with the big shots. The slaves, I mean, and the lower classes were just worthy of death. They were not worthy of anything, of any knowledge like this. And so I do believe the objects in which he's speaking would have been completely shocking, and would have seen as a total waste of his time by the people in the universities.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
One other quick thought.
Yes, sir.
It'll make me think, as you're talking, can we have a positive attitude without the Spirit? And at Galatians 5, it says, the fruit of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience. Can we even have a positive attitude without the Spirit? In Christ, obviously, the Spirit is part of the Trinity, and part of who God is. So he had the fruit of the Spirit, right? Because it was part of who he is. But for us to walk by the Spirit, can we even have a positive attitude? Can we do anything on our own without the Spirit? Can we do anything positive, I should say?
Right. Ultimately, no. Ultimately, no. Because let's face it, there, and I remember Dad speaking on a sermon about, the wicked people can do, indirectly or without purpose, they can do positive things. Ultimately, ultimately they're going to be either, destroyed or the downfall. Ultimately, whether it's them or the next generation, whatever. But there's plenty of wealthy, wicked people out there, who make a positive impact on the economy, and only because God has blessed them, no other reason. Because he felt he's using them for his purpose. That's it. That's it. But yeah, I was going to say, let's see. Paul's. My wife and I are going through all the books that Paul has written. Paul examples of Paul's attitude. 2 Corinthians 11:23. I think a lot of you might know where I'm going with this. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequently, in deaths often. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. How many times did Christ receive that? Once. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I had been in the deep. I don't know what that means. I didn't really research that. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Good job.
My translation says adrift at sea.
Yes.
Adrift at sea. Okay, cool. A night and a day I've been in the deep, in journeys often, in perils of waters, in perils of robbers, in perils of my own countrymen, in perils of the Gentiles, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren. In weariness and toil, in sleeplessness often, in hunger, in thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. Besides the other things, what comes upon me daily, here's what comes upon me daily. In the midst of all these things, my deep concern for all the churches. What is Paul focused on in the midst of all this stuff? The church. Again, I'm coming back to, you can't have a positive attitude without focusing on other people. If you're just focusing on yourself, I hope everybody is uncomfortable with this. I'm uncomfortable with this. Okay, I mean, I struggle with it all the time. I hope you were, if you're comfortable with your attitude, that's a bad attitude. Okay? You should always be growing. A diamond is, in order to become a beautiful diamond, it has pressure, intense pressure, and chipping away. Okay? I'm talking to myself, guys. Like I'm learning a lot just by doing this lesson. But in verse 30, skipping a little bit, he says, "If I must boast, I will boast in the things which concern my infirmity, and boast in my weaknesses." Paul is. I don't know. I hope and pray that if I lived back in the day, I would be hungry for what Paul had, because to be around this guy is probably constantly uncomfortable. You know, like just making you feel like you need to do more, and you're not really not good enough, because he tells everybody that, you know, we are, you know, ambassadors for Christ, and we are God's children, and always encouraging them. But I don't think if you came up and say, Paul, say, "How you doing, Paul?" He'd be like, "I'm okay. I'm hanging in there." I don't think so. Christ, no way. Are you serious? He'd probably rebuke you. You know, if you came up and said, "How are you?" and you said, "I'm doing all right. I'm okay." He would probably rebuke you. This is my guess. And we skip over a chapter to 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 9. Yes, he says, "Unless I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." At the end of the sermon, Pastor was saying, we always need to be thankful. We need to, thankfulness and gratefulness. This is what Paul is displaying here. About my infirmity, I'm grateful for my infirmities. I'm thankful that Christ gave me this reply, lest I be exalted above measure. Another example. Let's see, Ephesians 4:22. For Paul. And there's millions. When we were going through all these books, we couldn't count how many times Paul said, "Always be thankful, and always pray, and always be thankful, and I'm always thankful for you." Thankful was in every one of his books. Every one of his books. He would be thankful for them, and then he would rip them a new one. Right? He'd rip them a new one, and then he would, at the end, he'd always tell them to be thankful again. You know? Gratefulness and thankfulness are a positive, or they are a byproduct of a good attitude. I guess maybe it's the other way around. Good attitude is a byproduct of thankfulness and gratefulness. Either way. Ephesians 4:22. This is a great definition. Oh yeah, let's see. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah. I'm sorry, Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but only what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. You know that saying, if you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all? That applies here, you know? Now, I'm not talking about, there's a place to be angry, and there's a place to, you know, obviously in examples, but in just commonplace, everyday, our petty little problems and our differences, we're not supposed to be focused on those things, you know? Only what is good and edifying. For example, I was just talking to one of the guys that I work with, who's in close association with the owner. It's an orchard. It's a multi-million-dollar business. It's 100 acres. I said, well, there's a lot of equipment that's out in the rain all the time. I said, man, you guys ought to build a pole barn. You guys ought to build a huge pole barn, and have everything put into the pole barn so you guys can take care of your equipment better. He's like, oh man, trust me, it's not a money issue. We have the money, and we have the means, and we have the space to do it. It's a legal issue. Okay? These guys, I mean, it's a dumb example, but their roof, it's based on roof space. The more roof space you have, the more a greater plan, a storm drainage plan you have to have for the water that runs off your roof of the building that you create. Now, if you're telling me that these people actually legitimately cared about the rain and the ground and the creek, we got to have a conversation. I mean, that is insane. That is something that you are biblically and morally allowed to be angry about, because that is invasion of your private property, and total invasion. Like that is an example that you're allowed to get angry at. Not irrationally angry, but you can get angry. And you should be angry about that. I said, you know what, you guys would probably pay just as money if you didn't get any permits and just build it and pay the fines. You'd probably save just as much money. Pay just as much money as if you paid for the permits. But anyway, it's ridiculous. I heard a great saying, you can tell a lot about a man by the things that bother him. I think modern day Christians are obsessed with being attractive to the pagans. I mean, they roll out the right carpet for the pagans, right? And then they just get out of the way, and the pagans, well, I'm not comfortable with this. Oh, I'm sorry. What are you most comfortable with? Well, let us do that. Drives me up the wall, man. And you know what? I'm obsessed about being attractive too, just not in the same way they are. Let's Acts 4:13. Acts 4:13. This is what attracts people right here. This is, oh man, I didn't even look at the event. Andres, this is Peter in front of the Sanhedrin, right? When they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men, they marveled. This is a literal example of what I'm talking about. And the next part. And then they realized that they had been with Jesus. Some of these people probably never even met Jesus, but they realized that they were with Jesus because of the boldness and their attitude that they had. That's it right there. That's what attracts people. Are we supposed to attract everybody? Yes or no? Why not? Not everybody's been drawn. Did Christ attract everybody? Maybe he did somewhat in the beginning. Had crowds of thousands. Where were all those people when he was on the cross? He didn't attract everybody. I think that's very encouraging, because when people, like Dad said it in his sermon today, they're going to hate you because of me. People will hate you and persecute you and revile you. And then James says, consider it pure joy. Pure joy. he didn't attract all the people, he attracted the right. That's all he wanted. He just needed 12 right guys. You know what I mean? It would turn into 120 guys. Right? They didn't change the world with those guys. You know? So, I do care. You know, what if our attitudes change and show that we don't care about what the pagans think? We just don't care. You know? That's something I gotta work on all the time, man. I'm there when somebody says something dumb about Christians or whatever in front of me and I run for the tall weeds. I've done that. I've been there, man. You know? It's uncomfortable. And it's scary. But we have no excuses here. Paul, I mean, come on. Maybe, you know, you can't use the excuse, well, Christ was God in the flesh. He could do whatever he wanted. What about Paul? I would submit, actually, that Paul, in the long run, had more punishment. If Christ was, ministry was as long as Paul's, Christ would have gotten persecuted more. But overall, Paul got persecuted more than Christ did. But Christ's ministry was only 3 years. You know, right? How long was Paul's ministry, Mr. Vanderbilt, or anybody? I don't know, 30, 40 years, I'm not sure.
Might have been longer than.
Might have been longer than that. But we will attract the right people. Okay. Make sure I got time here. Make sure I'm covering everything here. But what? Again, it's all about perspective, and this is the you know, this is the challenge that, you know, I have with myself. I challenge myself and I'm going to challenge everybody here. What bothers you? You know what I mean? It's all about perspective. It's all about perspective of how you perceive from a biblical point of view. I think they're clearly saying all the time that you cannot be worried about the petty little things in your life. Like, you know, so, you know, Dad mentioned the Coney today. Like, Africa is a mess. I mean, wicked people everywhere. Christians are under constant fire, murdered, abused, raped. So, like, you know, how do we apply that? So your boss chewed you out today, huh? Bummer, man. Was your daughter stolen today? Was your daughter kidnapped? And who knows what they're doing to them? They're doing? You had an intense argument with your wife last night, huh? Did you find out that your wife was raped on her way to the market? Huh? You know, like, I think this is just, I try to keep things in perspective. You got a bad cold, huh? Sorry to hear about it, man. Was your son taken from you and forced to murder others at the age of 10? That abortion story, man, was messed me up, man. What do you say when, you know, in America we become so comfortable with our, you know, our comfort. We got all the comfort. We're rich compared to us, country, but all other countries. I say, you know, what's your, you know, okay, say, so what do you say when someone asks you how you're doing? What do you say to that? You know, I submit to you that you say anything less than I'm doing good, that is not Christ-like and that is not biblical. I will submit that to you. That is not a Christ-like attitude. Because in comparison to what I just gave you, you were doing amazing. If I ask somebody that and anything less than good, I don't know if to say this is bad, but I don't want to talk to that person. You know, I read it before. Only what is edifying, only what is building up. Is that building somebody up by talking about, oh, I'm okay, this happened to me today? Is that building somebody else up? What if the person that asked you that is going through a worse struggle than you? just don't know. What if that person just has a positive attitude and he's not gonna dump all his problems on you? I'm talking about petty little problems. I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about divorce or, homosexuality. I'm just talking about your petty little problems. I got them too. You're not gonna hear me talking about it. Especially on a Sunday morning, I'm here to uplift the church. Dad and Mr. Bain and a lot of the guys in here are Saturday nights are thinking about how they can encourage the church the next day and uplift people. And they have problems. I don't hear them talk about them. Paul had problems, obviously. I don't hear him talk about them. Except with the lesson behind it, when he's focusing on other people again. To the men out there, when you get home, can your wife read on your face that you've had a bad day? If she can, you need to change your attitude. Is that gonna? If you're coming home from work and you're dumping all what you said in your wife's probably had a rough day already. What are you do? What are you doing by talking about how bad your day was to her? That's not uplifting. That doesn't encourage her. That's discouraging. That's the last thing she needs to hear. Wives, same way to the husbands. Boy, we're working that all the time, aren't we, huh? When I have a bad day, honestly, I don't have that many bad days, I'll be honest with you, but I can't afford to have my kids see me have a bad attitude. I can't afford it in the long run, in the future. My kids, can your kids tell you have a bad attitude? Can your kids tell you had a bad day? Boy, you better change your attitude, man. Yeah.
Could I ask maybe, is it bad that you have a bad day or bad that you have a bad attitude about your bad day? Because I think that if we say you have a bad day and it's wrong, well, not necessarily, but I think, I don't know, just I'm sorry, is that what you mean for?
I mean, it's not bad to have a bad day. Everybody has a bad day. I'm not saying that. I hope I don't come across like that. It is bad if you. I say it is bad if you let everybody know that you had a bad day. Yeah, Jerry might do it.
I've heard people say, I mean, we can choose our response.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think Christ is. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. I think God has given us the ability to control, in fact, not the ability, but the responsibility to control our attitudes and our actions. Mr. Shepard.
If I can add to that, I mean, let's say you have a bad day and you come home to your wife and you tell her, oh my gosh, this guy did this guy did that. She can't do anything about it. And now what you've done is, you can't do anything about it, she can't do anything about it. Now what you've done is if that's in her mind, and tomorrow you're at work, what's she thinking about? Man, he said, that guy probably did, and now not only have you polluted her mind, you know what I mean? Like, she can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about it. Just go, do your thing, and come back and tell, hey, listen, it was a great day, It was. Because, just like you said, people have worse problems than a coworker, So it's just, there's no point. If the guy can't solve the problem, if the person you're telling to cannot do anything about it, then there's no point in telling. No point.
Yep. Mr.
I
Greenway.
just want to point out that we're talking here too about priorities. I can have a bad day at work because somebody did something dumb. Or I can have a bad day at work because the business is about to go under. You have to have a set of priorities to say, where do I cut this off to talk to my wife about? She needs to know that we're almost out of business. She doesn't even know that, Joe Lowe did something really stupid today.
Right.
Because we also need to engage our families, our church family in prayer for our concerns and for problems. But then that's edifying. and it's not.
Yep.
So it's just a matter of being able to set priorities properly in a biblical context.
Yep. Now, like, and that's exactly, I mean, that's what I was saying before, just, it's the little things that you, just the big things, the business is going under, your wife needs to know about that. We're not gonna be living here for that much longer. You're gonna tell her the day of, like, that's not gonna work out, you know? Mr. Grader?
I was just gonna say it's a difference between coming home and dumping on your wife or her on you,
Yeah.
as opposed to discussing things and helping him or her.
Yep. And working through it.
Correct.
I'm working through it.
You don't wanna hold all that stuff in.
Right.
I say, speaking of this, as a sort of a practical matter, sort of, I haven't really been able to do it, I don't think I'll ever get it done. Good attitude. Maybe I will. Maybe. I got a hold of this term that I think I use a lot, I know I use a lot, and oftentimes it's a dad thing. And it's that term that ends up with around here. And I realized one day that whenever I'm home and I'm saying around here, whatever precedes around here, is almost always two things. It's dumping and it's complaining. And that phrase around here always proceeds with something like, nobody ever does the dishes around here. There's never any food around here. Nobody ever picks up their toys around here. And it's nothing, there's no working, you know what I mean, there's no plan to fix it. It's just pure dumping. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
So my method is to try to get rid of around here, and hopefully it'll cut down on the complaining that precedes that. I don't think I've ever said, or rarely said, man, everybody's just so happy around here. Everything's just picked up around here.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's kind of like a bad way to do it. It would probably be better if I would just say, you know what, I'm not gonna complain to come anymore. But I kind of do it through the back door. Okay, no more around here. It's done.
Yeah.
I don't think of it.
Right. Mr. Dean?
Yeah, when we talk about having a bad day, normally that's because we're focused on ourselves. And, I mean, we think about things that come into our lives that can seem to be bad. Christ experienced a lot of those kind of days that seemed to be bad, but he still had a positive outlook. That's because ultimately things were happening to glorify God. And if we can get that perspective, which is not easy, because we seem to focus on ourselves more times than not, then our living the life that God wants us to live is a whole lot easier. Our job, may be going under. Wow, I wonder what exciting thing God's going to have in store for me now.
Yep.
We just don't think of those things. We're so, unfortunately, self-centered. And that's the only reason we have a bad day. I have a guy come in almost every day at the post office. He's not a Christian, but he's got an attitude that puts a lot of Christians to shame. He comes in and, how are you doing on this great day? And he's already told me things that he's going through that are not that wonderful. You're having a wonderful day, and it's like, I am having a wonderful day. And it takes someone like that sometimes to, to remind you that God really did give you a wonderful day. And you are there now to share that with other people. So it's just, if we could get out of thinking of ourselves, it will make our life with ourselves and with our families that much better. And I'm preaching to myself too. I mean,
I think we're all talking to ourselves.
yeah.
Yeah. As a Christian, we should be the most positive. We should be mad because that guy's doing that. And we're not. we should be the ones with the positive outlook on the world, everything. But that's what attracted everybody, Peter, Paul, John, that's what attracted everybody. Was the boldness and the passion they had for Christ and His Word and the future, basically. It's just, I challenge all of us here, including me, to just, I mean, it comes down to focus. Just be focused on, in the Word, and focused on what you can do daily, hourly. Because when we're pressured, that's when our attitude really comes out, right? When we're pressured, when we start under pressure, when there are bad things happening, that's when your attitude's going to be displayed to your wife and your kids, your family, everybody. And there's, like I said, how much scripture could we go to support that theory? You know? Christ said, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. Always good to know that the things that you're doing, there is, whatever you're going through, this too shall end. This too shall end, whether it's by just the problem ending or by death, and you go to, ultimately, you're with Christ in the end, you know, in heaven. What's not to be positive about that? You know? Look at that. Right on time. That's pretty much all I had. Like I said, there's so many other scripture you can go to help us. It's there all the time. I mean, we have no excuses, guys, to have a negative attitude about hardly anything, barely anything. Any other comments or questions or anything for yes, sir,
Well, in Philippians, when Paul wrote, it says, do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe, as you hold out the word of life, in order that I may boast on the day of Christ, that I did not run or labor for nothing.
That's a great verse. That's a great verse. I was looking for actually the one that said, Paul said, somebody said, I don't know who said it, or our attitude should be that of Christ Jesus. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Doesn't Philippians? Okay, I was looking for that. I couldn't find that anywhere. But John, did you have something to say?
Yeah, just back to 2 Corinthians 11 with Paul's boasting all these things that he's had to deal with, all these problems that all these unfortunate events that come on, and persecution, struggles, trials. But he's boasting, looking at what God has brought me through.
Right.
Despite my weakness, despite these things that have happened.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like dumping it on the churches. It's like, look at all this.
Yep. He is not dumping. He is not dumping.
Yeah, say, in that case, he basically says, I wasn't even talking about this. But you guys made me talk about it because you want about qualifications. All right, here's mine.
Yep.
Which I think would have been pretty much any discussion.
I was going to say something about what Jonathan said. I'm so glad that Paul put that. I'm so glad it's in the Bible. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so glad that we can look at that. And because it's such a lesson. And then I've never heard that passage preached on in any sermon, ever. I'm sure Dad's getting to it eventually. But I've never heard that preached in any sermon because nobody likes to. Boasting is bad, right? If you boast about yourself, if you boast about yourself in any way, it's bad. That's not right. How many times has Paul said, imitate me? How many times he said that? 3 or 4 times when we were going through the scriptures. Imitate me, not Christ. Why didn't he say imitate Christ? He does say that, but imitate me. He talks about confidence and boldness. What? Confidence and boldness, that's a whole other lesson. But anything before I say a word of prayer?
I think the craziest example of the right attitude is probably Balaam and his donkey. Because he went with a curse, a very negative message, curse the children of Israel. By the time his donkey got with him, done with him, and God, he became very positive. Change that.
Yeah. 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 Somebody else? Awesome. Hold the word of prayer. Go eat some delicious food. Okay. Thank you, Lord, for another gorgeous day. Thank you for the folks in here who are hungry and want to change and grow and have the attitude of Christ, the attitude of Paul. And thank you for giving us once again the opportunity to meet together and talk about these things. And help us, and thank you for the iron to use to sharpen iron. We thank you for just the blessings you bring down. Help us as church to grow and impact others for Christ. Bless our attitude, Lord. Help them to be uplifting and encouraging all the time. We thank you once again for, we can't thank you enough for all your blessings. Bless each and every parent in here who are raising their kids to be like you. Help them to always set the right example, to speak what is right into their kids and talk about the Bible when they get up and when they lay down and throughout the day to their children and to our children. We thank you for the just again the wonderful opportunity to be together this morning. Pray that you would help us to go out and pursue your glory and your righteousness this next coming week. And we thank you all for the praise and glory. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.